Hello there, Seraphim17 once again. This is my ReCore walkthrough, and we're back at it doing some Prismatic core hunting. So this is the 14th installment of the videos, and we're entering the cradle so that we can do some happy fun times. And whenever you're searching for the Prismatic cores in ReCore, there is both a measurement of enjoyment and a measurement of obfuscation. And I say this because it can be quite difficult to understand where they are. The game hides them a little bit too well, and then at other times, not so well at all. So because there is this interesting combination of, oh, I stumbled across a core, and I literally cannot find this one, what the hell am I doing wrong? It really doesn't convey to the player of their significance when it's something that you seem to either stumble across or not really find. And then when it comes to finding them, you have to do some really interesting stuff. And I would normally recommend that you do all your Prismatic core hunting when you get the flyer, because the flyer enables you to do a lot of crazy stuff. And at the moment, I don't have him. I don't think, anyway. So you're going to see me going up here, which leads to a dungeon, and it also leads to a potential sinking through the world. So be very careful on the sand here, because I fell through the world there. Up the top of here is a power cell. There's quite a few power cells around here that enable you to unlock this dungeon to my right. Additionally, this is the dungeon where you have to dig, but I come up here to get a better lay of the land. Be careful running up the barrel of this construction piece, because you can actually fall through it randomly. But this is the dungeon just over here. And you'll notice, I think there's that part that's missing, and then there's the red part that's missing. To my left is a patch where you can dig. There's also a couple of fights up here, so be careful. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to go... Can you remember when I said on an earlier video when we were going towards the core foundry? I said, remember this rock, you're going to come back here when you have Duncan. I think that's what we're going to be doing now. We're going to be picking up that core there, and then picking up a couple of other cores here. Because we are near Kai's crawler. And I do believe there's another aspect of the cradle to the left of this zone that I haven't even been in, because I didn't need to get to the end of the game, so it's something to come back to. But if you're looking to be a completionist, you definitely want to go down there, because there will no doubt be a lot of Prismatic cores, because apparently there are 80 in this game. Which is not quite, 120 or anything ridiculous like that, but 80 is quite a lot considering you only need 45 to beat the game. And getting 45, unless you have a lot of the dungeons unlocked and you've been everywhere on the map, can kind of feel like a high number. But you can see there's a couple of different cores here, so I'm going to be using Seth to get to the middle of that tower where there's a core waiting for us. It's also a rock to smash with Duncan. You can see it just from here. Did you see the green just then? Over there? You can see it now. See it? Just at the centre of the screen, just above centre. So, you want to use the traversal pads that you can see to get over there, and then break it with Duncan, and that'll be a free Prismatic core. But I'm going to use this as an opportunity to talk about some other things, because, as you know, ReCore is a pretty simple game in a lot of ways. I think it's simple to a flaw. And it could have been tweaked in slight ways, and all of that would have been remedied, but they went with a very specific thing, and then they never built upon it, and it's one of my greatest criticisms of the game. I've mentioned it a little bit. How do you fix it, I think, is an interesting question, and I've mentioned a couple of ways that I think I would have done it, whereas I would have had the affinity system mean more, because I think it should have. I would have enabled the character to carry all of the robot companions so that you could use their affinity systems to give it an extra element of strategy. And I think that the enemies should have had more definitive attacks. It should be less about getting rushed and getting stunned and firing like pissy-pussy bullets that don't do shit. Watch this, by the way. Whenever the character wails her arms like that, you cannot jump or boost. She's completely immobile. So you might be wondering, Chris, why the hell did you cut that so close? It's because I couldn't move. So I got very lucky then. But I would definitely have added the bullet hell element to it, because I think it would have made it a lot more interesting than it is. I would have taken away some of the properties of the enemies to be cheap bastards, and instead made them a little bit more strategic, made them a little bit more evasive potentially. Because there's a mechanic on this that I've not really talked about that's interesting, but you never need it. which is when you're locked onto an enemy and they dodge you, your lock-on goes into a soft lock and you will miss. So you have to unengage it and then re-engage to get back on them. And it only happens like once every 20 fights, so you never notice it's really a mechanic. That could have been really important. I think they should have given you some kind of importance with manual aiming, and they didn't. Because you don't have to use the lock-on in this game, you can aim 100% yourself. But why would you ever need to when the lock-on is so convenient? And they could have done this by, if you manually shoot things, you do 1.5 times the damage, or 2 times the normal damage. You get some kind of inherent damage bonus. Something like that. They could have made it that your gun fires faster. Like when you lock on, it slows the rate of your fire, so you're unable to do the same kind of damage as you would if you skillfully aimed. And then it would incentivize giving players a choice. It would be a little bit like the auto combos in King of Fighters 14, where if you want to do proper damage and you want to learn the systems of that fighting game, you have to learn to link from lights, and you have to learn how to link correctly, accurately and fastly, because punishing people in that fighting game happens in frames. It happens in literally seconds. It's very fast, which is why a good player and a bad player are so massively divided in those games, because you can see immediately who knows how to play King of Fighters and who doesn't, because that is a game where punishes are so quick. The average player who isn't practiced and doesn't have it as reflex is not going to punish anything appropriately, whereas a good player is going to fuck you up. And it could have been the same here. In that game, if you bash A or X or whatever, your character does an automatic combo, and he'll do a combo that you actually cannot do. He will link between moves that don't link, and then he'll do a special. And it'll do reduced damage because you did the auto combo system, but it enables people who can't get the timing or don't want to have cool looking combos immediately, but they don't get the same damage as if they'd done it properly. And that to me is a great balance, because you have something that enables people to feel like they're doing well, and then they come up against somebody who knows how to actually do well, and they get destroyed, because they're just mashing one button, and that's not how fighting games work. And of course, this is an adventure game, this is kind of action platformer, exploring game, not a fighting game, but the principles can be the same. Give somebody the lock-on who doesn't want to bother aiming, but give the person who wants to aim an incentive to do it, and something that feels like his ability is giving him an advantage. That to me is just game design 101, and they never give you the option. That was a mistake. But you can see the idea of what we're going for and how we need to do it. And the good news is it gives me an opportunity to talk, because I haven't had a chance to really say much. All my tangents get cut short. Lovely invisible wall, my favourite. Because I think with the way that the game works as it stands, the environment should have been more intensive. I think you should have fought in arenas where platforming was legitimately threatening. There is like one fight in this game where you can fall off, where I fell off. And I only fell off because I was backpedaling, like you do in every third-person shooter. But imagine if the camera shifted perspective, so it went into a kind of bird's-eye view, and you were fighting a boss, and all you're doing is holding both triggers, and you're always going to shoot him because it's locked on perfectly, but the environment started shifting. So you had to then, while shooting the boss, do complex platforming. If that doesn't sound cool to you, then you probably don't want challenge in video games. Because I think that would be fantastic, and it would be a lot like that Red Star game that came out on the PS2, which had some interesting moments, but they could have just shift the dynamic of the camera a little bit so that the perspective's slightly altered, and then make us have to do kind of platforming and make it challenging. Because holding two triggers is easy. If your character's going to shoot at something without you having to, shoot, then you should have been called upon in other ways. And there are no real parts of this game, outside of potentially the really hard stuff at, the bonus dungeons that I've not seen, where the game demands anything of you. And because it doesn't demand you to aim, it should demand you to move. And we know from playing, the enemies don't challenge you in a sufficient way that you have to really dodge them, because in a lot of ways, they can be really undodgeable in the most douchiest way. And then, when they're not being undodgeable, they're not attacking you. So you're already shitting on them and perma-stunning them and getting rid of them. So there were so many ways that they could have incorporated features to make this game, valid. And there are ways to make platforming difficult without changing the camera and without hindering the player. Because a lot of the environments that we're in on this game specifically are space-esque, futuristic, dystopian future kind of environments. And a lot of it has very dramatic lighting. And can you remember that area that we were on where the floor glowed before it turned into an inferno and you had to move? If you're shooting a boss and the camera's at its average height, you're going to be able to see the shimmering effect or the light cast up, like the pillars of light that you can see from the ground, and all you had to do for an environmental floor puzzle was have the light be your guide. So while you're shooting the opponent, you can see these pillars of light coming from the ground showing you that that plate is safe and you need to get to it, or you die, or you take damage, and you could have been navigating essentially a minefield of danger while still actively fighting the boss. And not only are you multitasking and doing two things at once, but it's intensive, it's reliant on your ability to react to the floor changing, react to the enemy attacking you, and all these elements come together to make a demanding encounter. Whereas this game is literally hold both triggers and win. And there's nothing wrong with that if that's what you want, but I want it to be more. I want to feel like the game has a point, instead of just easy combat, easy platforming, end of game, pointless fetch quest. But thank you for watching, and you take care now.